Hey all, how's everybody doing tonight?
Great.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'm Phil Venable. I'm a co-founder of Mighty Neighborly. Got their sign, that's who we are. We're a nonprofit that's devoted to the idea that citizenship just isn't a privilege or a right, but it is a responsibility. And it's a responsibility that we all need to take very seriously, that we need to be informed, and we also need to vote. So we're pleased to be able to present the debate tonight. We'd like to thank the Cradle for hosting, Keith for doing sound, Frank and Kristen for helping set this up. We really appreciate that. Let's give them a big round of applause. They're an institution in Carrboro, and sometimes, well, at one point Chapel Hill. So let's just keep buying drinks and tipping our bartenders and keeping this place in business. I'd like to thank Mayor Lavelle and candidate Benson for agreeing to this. They're both fine candidates, and we're lucky that no matter who wins, that we'll have good representation. Obviously, there can only be one mayor. There was no lieutenant mayor, sorry.
Highlander.
But I'm very confident that whoever wins, we will continue to enjoy the quality representation and leadership that Carrboro deserves. I'd also like to thank our moderator, Tanner Glenn, who is, he's like so fresh-faced. It's wonderful. He's a student at UNC, but he's from Johnson County. He also campaign managed for Rich Nixon. And additionally, he has helped stand up the UNC Institute of Politics. They are a nonpartisan group that is dedicated to hopefully having a conversation across the aisle to help increase the chances of better representation in North Carolina. So let's give Tanner and the Institute a big hand, and let's check them out as we keep moving forward. Just a couple words about tonight. We have some questions for the candidates. There'll be a time for them to respond and a brief time for rebuttal. And we're going to try and do that for about maybe 30 to 45 minutes, and after that we'll open up the mic. Now, the Rocky Horror Picture Show is right after this, folks, so we have to shut this down around 9 or so. So we appreciate you coming out, and we're going to enjoy ourselves, and we're going to learn a lot more about Carrboro. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you all for being here, and I think we can just go ahead and get started. So just wanted to give you each a chance to talk a little bit about your platform and reason for running. So we'll start with you, Mayor Lavelle. Why should we re-elect you to be mayor?
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Tanner, and thanks, Phil. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I don't know about you, Mike, but I can't see anyone. It's kind of, I can see you now, but anyway, it's great to be here and appreciate this forum and this opportunity to speak a little more in detail about some of our issues. I've been involved in public service all of my life. When I was in high school, I umpired games. When I was in college, I got a degree in recreation administration from NC State, a graduate degree. I worked for the city of Durham for many, many years. And then after I went to law school and became an attorney, I stayed involved on different advisory boards so that I could still continue to participate in government. I was on our Recreation Advisory Committee in Durham, the Durham Open Space and Trails Commission in Durham for 10 years, and really found that I enjoyed seeing government from that side, from the volunteer side, in addition to having, just worked for the city of Durham for many, many years as a recreation supervisor. When I moved to Carrboro, I had an opportunity to get involved with a few different groups, so one of which was the planning board, and so I got to really know the community from that end. And I lived in Carrboro when I was in law school, so it was kind of nice to come back to this area. Of course, I got elected to the Board of Aldermen twice, and then I've served for mayors twice. So I have 10 years of elective office, and I feel like that 10 years has been spent really doing a lot of good work, getting to know the issues all in depth, and I liken being in public office to like there's a train moving, and you jump on the train, and you ride on it for a while, and then you jump off, and that train continues. And so part of what we have to do is hit the ground running with a lot of our issues, and that often means looking back at old minutes or old meetings or old issues to find out, the status of issues that we're dealing with. I feel like my experience in that realm really situates me nicely to be elected for a third term as mayor. I guess, so a couple of reasons I'm running. One is to continue to shepherd several important projects we have going on in the town, some of which are in the pipeline, some of which are coming. A second reason is to be a strong voice against a lot of the actions of our North Carolina General Assembly, and in fact, this past year, really of our national executive branch, our president. I've had to, along with our board, really stand up to a lot of the actions that they've taken. So I think it's important in that respect. And I'm also a member of the Metropolitan Mayors Coalition. That's a membership group of the mayors of all the largest cities in North Carolina and Carrboro. Okay, so we're a part of that. And that's a really great group to strategize about how we want to address legislative policies or proposals coming from the legislature and try to speak from one voice across North Carolina. I think it's really important to have that, also that perspective. I helped lead the fight against HB2 last year. I'm the only gay mayor in North Carolina right now, and so I kind of feel like that gives me a nice, bully pulpit, really, a nice way to go out and speak and talk about how it's affecting not just my citizens, but also myself personally as I advocate around the state. Those are some of the reasons I'm running for re-election. I know that we'll get into some more issues too.
Absolutely, and then your turn, candidate Benson. Why should folks elect you to be mayor?
Well, I'd start with I'm born and raised in Chapel Hill and Carrboro. I was born in UNC Hospital, product of the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools, graduated Chapel Hill High School in 1985. Ran on the cross country team. We started the lacrosse team at Chapel High School. Went to UNC, and then I transferred down to Savannah College of Art and Design and got my Bachelor of Fine Arts degree down there in photography. Got married to Christy, and she became a lawyer. And we traveled around the world for a while. We lived in Switzerland and Thailand, and moved to DC and lived there for 10 years, opened a couple restaurants in DC, and then came back to raise our kids. Christy got a job at Elon. And I bought the trains over across the street here at the tracks and opened Southern Rail. It was a huge build out, it cost a bit of money to do, and it was a lot of work. And we were there for 11 years. And after 11 years, it was time to move on, and ended up shutting it down and selling it and trying to figure out what the next move in life is. Doing a lot of freelance photography. And as I look at the town and I'm watching the changes go through, particularly from being a small business person in the town of Carrboro and operating up restaurants and being friends with all the other restaurateurs and hospitality and retail that's here, there's a nervousness that's going on with the growth and everything that's happening. And is the town and is the government really tuned into what's going on with the businesses themselves? We have an economic development director and with Annette, and she's a wonderful person. But I still think there needs to be a lot more dialogue with what's going on. And one of the things that people say about the mayorship is they're like, well, it's a part-time job. And I agree, it pays as a part-time job. The pay is $24,000 a year. And I think that we've now hit a tipping point in the town of Carrboro where you have to treat it more as a full-time job. And I know that Lydia is a well-respected professor over at Central and puts a lot of time and effort into her job over there. And it makes it very difficult to come back over here and put in the line. I mean, it's physically it's a demanding time gap in your life. I'm in a position in my life where I can actually commit that amount of time into doing this job at this period of my life. And I believe in it from the side of the business side and the downtown and the growth and where we're going, what's happening with building greenways in the woods. These are things we'll all be talking about in a few minutes. And basically where Carrboro has been and where we are going. And where is, we need communication, we need dialogue, we need transparency between the town government and the businesses and the residents and what is happening. It's an extreme, we're at a very critical point as the most densely populated town in the state of North Carolina. And we've become what used to be the hamlet of cheap cottages and everything else. We are now the most expensive. We're more expensive than Chapel Hill right now. So it's a very difficult time to try to move to Carrboro if you're young or if you're on fixed income and trying to assimilate in.
Thank you. And I know that we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the issues that you raised,
Sure.
but Mayor Lavelle, I wanted to give you a chance to respond on the issue of the mayorship being a part-time job.
Okay, sure. With regard to the mayorship being a part-time job, anyone who has held this position knows that it's a 24/7 position. It doesn't matter if I'm at school teaching a class. It doesn't matter if I'm at the beach on vacation. It doesn't matter if I'm at home in Ohio with my family. You know, you're always an email away, a phone call away. You're always engaged in your community. And I'll be in other towns looking at the way that the sidewalks and the traffic lights go, and I'll think, oh, I want to bring this back to Carrboro. So I guess my response to that is that, first of all, I think I've proven in my 10 years of elective office that I can balance it pretty well. And, you know, I'd like to talk to anyone who has called me to schedule an appointment, who hasn't gotten that appointment, or anyone who has been at an event and said, I wonder where Lydia is, and someone isn't there to say why I'm not there, but I'm usually there. And also I would say, you know, I have a pretty strong presence up and down the streets of Carrboro. Most of the shop owners and restaurant owners see me quite frequently, but I also have a really strong presence, you know, out in our neighborhoods and with our neighboring jurisdictions, with fellow elected officials, other relationships I have cultivated over the years. In North Carolina, we operate under what's called a council manager form of government, whereby the manager really runs the town. And the council, some of whom we have some board members here tonight, we set policy for the town. And the manager is the one who actually, you know, puts into action our policy. And in some communities, other states, the mayor really does have a lot of power, or the council really has a lot of power. But the way it works in North Carolina is that the council sets policy, including the mayor, on one of 7 votes, and the manager and the staff carry out those initiatives. So, you know, our town is not unlike every other town in North Carolina. You know, Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, Asheville, you know, I operate the same way that they all do. And I think I do a pretty good job of balancing it.
Absolutely. And changing gears a little bit, candidate Benson, in terms of economic development, what are some of your plans for Carrboro?
Well, I mean, as far as economic development, I mean, the first thing that we got to deal with is in the downtown area is parking and traffic. I've been going up and down and talking to the local businesses, everything from this and that to the barber shops and Armadillo Grill and Milltown and Surplus Sids. Parking is an issue. We just had a parking survey, and the parking survey says there's more than enough parking in the downtown. You just got to find it. And the problem that people have is people drive cars. It's just a fact. And if you're a small business and you can't give someone convenient parking to your establishment, they're going to go to Southern Village. They're going to go to Milltown or to Meadowmont, or they'll go somewhere else. They'll go anywhere where they can just park, walk up, and if you're like Surplus Sids and you want to buy an Army helmet, you're not going to park at the town hall, walk all the way downtown, buy a helmet, and carry it all the way back. So we need to resolve these issues of parking, and it's a huge issue with the downtown. From the 11 years that I had Southern Rail next to Carmel, and Carmel is dealing with parking issues. They're constantly at capacity. And as Carrboro is talking about growing and expanding, I'm like, where are we going to park these people? We want to bring people in from Mebane and Hillsborough and Graham. And where are they going to come to? They're not coming on their bicycles. They're driving. So we got to have convenient parking, and we need to figure out where it's going to happen. One of the things I've been proposing since doing this is the space that all the way from behind Armadillo Grill, there's a lot that's currently owned by Carmel. And I talked to Paul, who's the owner of Carmel, about selling that lot. South Orange Rescue Squad is the lot next to it. They would like to improve, to move to a different facility that has not the 1960s barriers that the building is, that they're living in right now. And they would also like to possibly move from the downtown area whenever they get an emergency call. They're like street lights, traffic and everything else. If they were closer to 54, it would be convenient to them. So possibly the development down on North Greensboro Street would be a good relocation for South Orange Rescue Squad. And then you have the lot that's currently owned by the town, where we're talking about the South Branch Library. If that was all turned into a 2-story high parking deck, the cost on that is actually fairly low. And it's not visible from Main Street. It keeps the impact visually for the town very low. It improves the parking, and on the top you could do solar arrays, you could do wind, you could alternative energy sources. You could even do artist studios up on the top, because Durham has taken a lot of our thunder when it comes to arts. They've done an amazing job at promoting it. Their art walk, I just did their art walk over there, and there was 70, 80 people going from the galleries to the studios. That used to be us 10 years ago, and it's turning into, we have a handful of people doing our art walks now. We need to promote that. Carrboro was the hub of the arts for the whole triangle for many, many years. And we need to partner with the Arts Center, and we need to partner with Frank over here at the Cat's Cradle. We need to talk to the galleries and the studios. We need to find a way to bring that energy back. If you bring the arts back to Carrboro, you will get hospitality, you will get the restaurants, you will get the retail. People will stay open later and shop. Gotta have a place to park these people. So the economic incentives start with the arts and the staff. We can also, I mean, I can go on and on about like trying to work with UNC and talking to them. Is the University of North Carolina is expanding. They have not been able to do Chapel Hill North on schedule at all, and they're looking to where they can do some facilities and research buildings, sustainability study buildings. So if we have spaces for lease or buildings like that, we need to work with UNC in getting them over here. And again, these are people that they leave their office building as a lunch. They're the people who are going to Armadillo Grill or eating out. So we need to be reaching out and partnering and doing a better job of partnering with the Arts Center and with our small businesses.
Sure. And then Mayor Lavelle, same question for you.
Okay. So the question was, how do we bring economic development to the town?
Right, economic development more broadly.
Okay, all right, so I'm gonna back up and talk about economic development. But first, one thing I wanted to say a minute ago was, Mike, you mentioned earlier that the mayor was paid $24,000. I want to let you know it was $17,000 or $18,000.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Well, with benefits, there is health care and benefits.
Okay, so economic development. The reason we want economic development is because we want to try to relieve the burden, the tax burden on people who own their homes. Because right now in our town, about 80% of the tax burden falls on residential homeowners. So it has been a goal of the Board of Aldermen for many years, as long as I've been on the board, to try to increase our commercial development in specific areas in town, and we've focused largely on downtown, although we have had a few other areas in town that we're starting to focus on as well. And the reason for this is, if we're able to develop commercial, then we get commercial taxes, which you get more taxes for commercial taxes than residential taxes. Plus, your infrastructure costs are less because you're not putting kids to school or having to do some other associated perhaps amenities that you might do with a residential area, like an expansion of water and sewer or things like that. So one thing we've tried very methodically to do is to figure out how we're going to grow commercially downtown. And I think if you look over the course of the last 10 to 15 years, I mean, we're in actually a product of that right now with East Main Street. And with the approval of our first hotel, which has opened up a couple of years ago, the approval of our second hotel, which is going to open up right behind this, it's going to break ground next year. So those are all ways to bring revenue into the town, because the commercial tax base, and also the hotels also bring what's called like a hotel tax. And that's money that we're able to put back into our Carrboro Tourism Authority that helps promote a lot of these activities and races and festivals and concerts and special events that we have downtown. which is another way to raise money for our town, and that is to increase our sales tax. So the more people we bring to town through these commercial buildings, through these activities, through our restaurants, people can come here, have a good time, spend money, we earn sales tax, and then they leave. So those are two really strong ways to try to increase revenue through economic development in town. One thing I'll say, so we've identified areas in town, it's thoughtful land use planning and zoning, the way you have to kind of think through how you grow. And so we've really had a lot of conversation about, just how tall do we want to be, how fast do we want to grow? And yes, we move slowly. And no, we don't, throw buildings up that are really high. We have a lot of conversation about it in this community. And one of the, so a couple of the thoughts that we've had lately, some of our conversations of late, as Mike was talking about, has been around our 203 South Greensboro property that we own. And that is, it's just a flat parking lot, 88 spaces. We purchased it a few years ago when a project that was approved for that site ended up not coming to fruition. And so we purchased it with an eye towards someday we'll do something with this property. And so we have been presented with this great opportunity to co-locate the county library, the Southern Branch Library, on that property. We've been negotiating with the county to do that. And that's going to be a good economic development driver, because that's going to bring people downtown. They're going to want to walk around and shop or eat or whatever. They're going to come to town and back. Further, we're in conversation with the Arts Center about whether they want to perhaps co-locate or move some of their programs to this building. This is the first brand new building, except for Fire Station number 2, that we've built in 100 years. So we're really excited to be able to do something with it. So that's another opportunity to bring people downtown to spend money. Along with that, we have had this conversation. It's not a new conversation about parking. And it's a complex one in our town. Do you want me to talk about the parking study right now? I mean, it's not
Sure, yeah.
Okay, since Mike was talking about it, I'm gonna bring it up. This parking study was really, really informative. And so if for folks who haven't read it or studied it, take the time to look at it, because what it showed us was, yeah, we have enough parking in town. Now, there's a lot of caveats. A lot of it's owned by private, owners, okay? Certain times of day we have plenty of parking. I mean, I parked right next door to the Hampton Inn, and there were plenty of spaces in there. The town already leases lots of spaces in there for the public to use. Right now, while we've been doing it for a few years, and we're gonna do it for a while longer until we do something else of our own. But in essence, what this parking study told us was, you have two options, or a couple of different options. One is, have someone work with the private landowners to find ways to share the parking. Now, we know a lot of folks already do that, but there are an awful lot of lots that stay empty in the evenings. And so, does that mean we facilitate that conversation among the landowners? Does that mean that, perhaps the town gets involved and in some way leases it for the public or whatever? I don't know. We're still exploring a lot of that, but one point is, don't build more parking until you use this parking that you have. Number 2 is, maybe we do build a deck. And we've been talking about that, again, for months. And we actually have been talking about it in the same area that Mike's talking about. But, if we do that, maybe what we do then is we're able to open up so that some of these other parking lots we're talking about that persons are using just for 8 or 10 spaces, maybe that provides an opportunity to build some more commercial development downtown and be able to have more opportunities for commercial tax base and for sales tax. So it's kind of a complicated question, but it's one, there's no easy solution, but we've been working on it, I think, very successfully for many years. That sales tax has gone up a lot the last several years, and that burden has decreased. Actually, I don't even think it's 80 now, I think it's in the 70s in terms of the impact on the residential tax base. And then one last thing I'll say about commercial development. One of our pieces of prime property that we have that's available for commercial development is the Lloyd property. And it's over near the post office. Okay, it's at the corner of 54 and Old Fayetteville Road. And we've had a really good project proposal. It came before us several months ago from the Lloyds. They worked with us for several years to try to come up with something that kind of balanced all the competing needs of the community and what they were bringing forward. And that would have been a great economic driver. I was in favor of it. And I think that many members of the board like the idea in general. We're working through some issues of flooding and traffic. And I I would really hope that that project gets to come back before us again, because that represents a development that will be largely commercial, that will add immensely to our tax base.
Great. And then, Mayor Lavelle,
Just the question I have about that is would it be possible, I mean, ground has not been broken on the library yet. Would it be possible, in talking to the Lloyd family about relocating the project from the library over to the Lloyd farm? It would keep it green, it would work together, and basically Chapel Hill has done the same thing. We're talking about a 60,000 square foot state-of-the-art library. Chapel Hill has done the very same thing. It's 3.2 miles away. UNC is 1.5 miles to the library down over there. We're actually in very close proximity with a free bus system to state-of-the-art libraries right now. Having it in the downtown area, I don't think is the smartest thing at this point. I think if you can, the town owns property by the graveyard off Fidelity Street, right behind where the fire station is, which also could be looked at for accommodating the library, or Lloyd Farm. And the Lloyd family, they're looking for a legacy in their lives. And the Lloyds have done a tremendous amount of work with Carrboro for many, many years. And you could do an outdoor performance space, you could, Parks and Rec could be there, and again, it would not take away the parking of the downtown. I don't necessarily see a lot of people that are going to the library over by Open Eye, maybe going to Open Eye for coffee, but not coming to the downtown. I mean, it's a very specific destination. So again, in trying to figure out where can this go, we haven't broken ground yet. I don't think it's too late. And in talking to the county, I talked to the Orange County Library about it, and they were like, well, the ground hasn't been broken. If it was to move over to the Lloyd Farm, it would need to happen very quickly. And for them not to pull support on doing the whole thing. The library is extremely expensive. I mean, already the estimates are varying from what I've been reading online, have been 12 to 15 million. Roger, who's the town manager, sent me an email saying that Carrboro doesn't pay for anything, which I don't understand, because I think we're on the hook for half of this, right?
Yeah, and who's Roger?
Roger Stansel.
From Chapel Hill?
I mean, our town manager.
David.
David.
Yeah.
David, I was talking to Roger the other day. David was saying, you know, we paid $600,000 for the lot, and then we paid $50,000 for the plans for the library so far. But we're trying to figure out. we're just trying to figure. This is a huge issue for people in downtown Carrboro, and it's something that a lot of people, the businesses, don't know what's going on with the library right behind them. And we need to find out what is happening and what is the cost. Because if we could talk about affordable housing, we could talk about the Greenway, we could talk about all these projects. But this budget is going to escalate. And where is the money going to come from for all the other projects if this library ends up going over cost and over budget, and we're on the hook for it? So I'm just trying to get a grasp, because I know that there's a lot of information on the website, and I've been trying to sort through it and talking to and sending an email to David and figuring out what exactly with the town budget. Our budget is $22 million a year, which includes all of fire, police, and everything else. How we are going to make all of these pieces fit and continue to all the services that we offer. And then I'm talking to Barbara Fouché about affordable housing and what she wants to do. How are we going to afford all this when we're about to drop some serious coin?
Mayor Lavelle, did you want a chance to respond?
Yeah.
Well, we've been talking about the library for a long time, like 10, 15 years. But more specifically, and we've talked about 4 or 5 different locations. This location's been on the table for 2 years. And at various times, I know that folks at Lloyd Farm were consulted. Fidelity Street was ruled out several years ago. Other locations ruled out, but ultimately the decision to place it where it is rested on a number of factors. Number one was proximity to, there was a sphere kind of drawn around it of, for example, how many lower income folks in the area it would bring in. And with regard to, Long 54 and different parts of our town, different parts of the corner of Chapel Hill, it represented almost the center of a circle that made sense in terms of transportation, being able to get there, not just by car, but also by bus and by bike. Secondly, I mean, we're splitting it with the county. In fact, we may end up paying more depending on what the arrangement is with the Art Center, depending on if we locate some administrative offices there. The good synergy is that we are splitting it with them. So we get to share. And again, if you watch the last several meetings that we've had, the last one in June and then 2 or 3 this fall, you'll see us having discussions about this. And you'll know that we have just recently approved a development agreement with the county that was hammered out and negotiated over the last several months, which very fairly allocates equally in some parts and proportionally in some parts how we're going to divide up all the costs of this really exciting building. And yes, it's budgeted for. It's in our CIP, and it has been in our CIP for years. And it also will have some monies go toward it as we consider our parking situation and as we ease out of the Hampton Inn parking deck problem. So again, it's a complex issue, but it's not a cash cow, and it's not a Taj Mahal. It's going to be one of the most wonderful buildings that we've ever seen in downtown Carrboro.
All right, and then still kind of on the topic of economic development, but on the issue of small businesses and local businesses here in Carrboro, and this question, first round to go to you. What are your plans to make sure that small and local businesses still maintain a viable presence?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is really important to us. Supporting our local businesses, our homegrown businesses. Again, as Mike said and I've said, we're 6.4 square miles. We're pretty small and compact. We're pretty dense. And we often find that we have businesses, number one, when businesses want to locate in our town, or when they want to be in our town, or if we have someone who wants to start a business, we have a revolving loan fund. It's been around forever, and many businesses in town got their start with a revolving loan fund, including Weaver Street. The county has grants and loans also that can go toward businesses that want to start here or want to expand or want to do something different. We've also had energy efficiency type of loans over the years for businesses that want to upgrade their businesses in a way to make them more energy efficient. Beyond all those, though, we have heard from a lot of our local businesses who want to expand, but they can't find anywhere to get more space in downtown Carrboro because we're so small. And so we have recently been exploring an affordable commercial park, if you will, off of Old 86 on some property that the town owns. And we're exploring that. We purchased it many years before I was on the board, but as a future public works site, which seems a little strange now, but in any event, it's a really nice piece of property we have that's not far from downtown, and we have talked to several businesses in town and heard from others that having affordable commercial where someone who wants to stay in the Carrboro area would be able to move, it could be affordable commercial because we own the property and because we would build it in such a way, being where it is, that it would be affordable. That's something we're trying to pursue right now, going through discussions with the neighbors, going through discussions with downtown, businesses and others, going through discussions with the Board of County Commissioners, who are a part of that also, because we're trying to work with them to help us extend water and sewer to that area. Another way we're trying to work with our local businesses that need to expand or need to find more space is we've been exploring how to work better out of old on 54 going toward Greensboro, because some of Carrboro goes out that way, and we have some challenges out there with the University Lake watershed and some zoning, but we've tried to find a way to make that affordable commercial available to some of our businesses that want to be able to expand.
Sure. And same question for you, Canada Benson.
The old 86 space sounds like a great spot for a library. There's got to be a way to make this work with and encouraging parking in the downtown. Supporting the local businesses, I've said before, and I went through this process of the revolving loan in downtown Carrboro. It actually happens faster and quicker. Typically, if you're an operating business or you're looking for a loan, working with a credit union, particularly a local credit union, used to be Harrington Bank, is who we worked with for years, and getting an SBA with the local bank and doing a credit union it's faster. And the biggest problem with trying to work with the town on doing the revolving loan is just kind of the bureaucratic element of it. There's a lot of kicking the can down the road and answering, and then we're going to have a meeting, and then we have to set up a meeting in 3 months. And when you're on your heels as a business, and you're trying to make payroll in January, and you're trying to figure out, do I pay the taxes or do I make the payroll? It's a difficult decision. And having access to being able to try to get that money fairly quickly is pretty important. And one of the things I was proposing was a grant system. It's not a terribly large amount of money, but if you go to any of these small businesses and you say to them, if it was available to come within about 30 days, and you apply for it, and you can get $2,000 in a grant that you don't pay back, this is support money. You put money into the coffers, into revenue, and we don't have to raise taxes. So we are willing to put this into you, and we have a rotating fund that we don't worry about and trying to be the bill collector, and we're trying to act as a bank. I think we've just outgrown the loan when it started with Weaver Street. I think was a very good thing. I just think we've outgrown it, and I think at a certain point, when it comes to loans, when we're talking about $50,000 and things like that, I think it's better to have a bank involved than it is to have the town. When we're talking about trying to give a small business that's been operating in the downtown for years, and it's just like, look, we're struggling, we're not getting enough walking traffic, and we're just really trying to get by in the month of January or the month of July in the summer when students are gone and it's really hot and walking traffic dies down. I'm telling you, $1,000 or $2,000, that's life to a small business. And it also says to the business, the town has your back. We have got your back. We are behind you, and we are trying to do everything we can to keep you here so that we don't turn into the 100 block of Franklin Street. I'm born and raised here, and I've watched Franklin Street when it was called the Village. And you had all these mom and pop businesses and restaurants on Franklin Street. And what I don't want to see is our town with, pita pits and pizza by the slice and things like that. And these franchises come in, and I've watched it happen. They don't contribute back to the community, and they're not the vibe of downtown Carrboro. And that's one of the things that we love about this town. In 2006, when we broke ground for Southern Rail, when you looked at what were the franchises in the downtown, you had Wendy's, CVS, and Harris Teeter, and that was it. We knew who they were, and the Wendy's is a locally owned franchise, and we got to meet the franchise owner, who's a super nice guy. And we know the Harris Teeter, the people that work there. And as we get into talking about affordable housing, Harris Teeter is now its own employees having to come from Mebane because the hourly wage is not keeping up with what the living wage is in Carrboro. Chapel Hill is actually cheaper. So it's difficult. So I'm delving into new territory.
Well, you get this round first this round, and it's a good segue to that question. So what are your plans for affordable housing in Carrboro?
Well, and this gets, I've said this before, it's an issue that precedes Lydia, even when Lydia was even a board member. I mean, the town of Carrboro used to be extremely affordable, and we should have been dealing with this problem years and years ago. And Mark Chilton, when he was mayor, Mark had talked about affordable housing and everything else. And the problem that we've had is we've kicked the can down the road. We've had surveys and committees and advisory groups and everything else, but we haven't really taken the bull by the horns when it talks to affordable housing in downtown Carrboro. And we have gotten to the point now where Carrboro is extremely expensive. And I'm talking to Barbara Fouché about programs she wants to do, and I'm talking to Paul and Jackie's here, I saw Randy's here. I'm asking people, I'm like, well, what can we do with affordable housing? Can we buy property and do tiny houses? Can we come up with some program where we work with a credit union and try to get first-time homeowners into housing? And these are all amazing and great things, except we're running out of room. We're running out of property that we could buy and put tiny houses on. And when it comes to a property like the old well, which is Collins Crossing, it's not feasible anymore for the town to go in and buy it. So there's a lot of things that we can do for affordable housing. I think we have to wrap our head around it. It's going to cost money. And the problem is this gets back to how much money will it cost for us to do the affordable housing projects we want to get into, and how are we going to carve that out of a budget that is already being narrowed down?
Sure. Lavelle, same question.
Thank you. I would say we have done more for affordable housing in the last 3 to 4 years than we've done in many, many years. Let me tell you a little bit about that. First of all, affordable housing, again, it's a really complex issue for a community that people want to be in. If it were an easy solution, places like New York and San Francisco and other kind of cities that have high rents, wouldn't be so expensive. So part of it is figuring out how do we maintain our vibe and what we want to be and how cool we are with this idea that people want to live here, and so then land costs more, and so then it's more expensive to live here. How do we figure that out? And so many years ago, the entities, the jurisdictional entities, the Board of Aldermen, Chapel Hill County Council, Orange County Commissioners. Anyway, the Orange Community Land Trust was formed as a way to try to land bank communities, land bank properties that were affordable for all time, like for 99 years with the land lease and with the ground lease. And so that's one way that the community has done that over the years before I came and after I leave. And I believe there's some 350 properties in our county that are in that affordable land trust. And as it's sold, it stays affordable, and another person under certain criteria can live in that land trust home. Those are integrated throughout the community. So that's one way that we want to have people of varying incomes be able to live in our community. What else? We did convene. This takes discussion, right? We convened an affordable housing task force in Carrboro about 6 years ago, maybe longer ago. And 3 board members met with a staffer and experts for a few years. And we came up with an excellent report on ways we can continue to attack affordable housing. And let me just back up for a minute. There's affordable housing in terms of, just lower income, poor people rent, and then poor people buy habitat type houses, and then regular, lower middle class folks wanting to be able to live in the community. So it's not just one vein of people we're talking about. There's several groups that you want to reach out to when you're talking about affordable housing. So the Affordable Housing Task Force, we came up with this fabulous report. Please find it on our website and look at it. It came up with some very, very specific goals and ways to reach those goals, like with specificity. And we recently appointed members of the community to serve on the Affordable Housing Commission. So it's transitioned from a task force into a commission now. But here's an example of a few of the items on there. And one is exploring tiny homes. One is exploring properties the town owns and figuring out how can we perhaps build on those properties or sell them to an affordable housing developer to build on, or sell them to Habitat or something like that. How can we leverage monies that we have, because we actually have an affordable housing task force fund that was created over the last couple of years that we've allocated monies into. And so it's a pretty hefty amount of money. How do we make decisions about where that money goes toward affordable housing? And we just partnered with the town of Chapel Hill and Orange County and CASA to break ground on some property along Merritt Mill Road that's going to have 50 or 60 affordable homes built on it because of leveraging all those entities as well as leveraging some tax credits. So you have to be kind of smart about how you think about how to do this. Other things that we're doing, I'll just mention 1 or 2 more. We've asked our staff to do a real good look at our land use ordinance, because we do allow certain forms of granny flat types on properties, but there's some hitches in our land use ordinance where I've had at least one resident come to me and say, I want to add on to my house in this manner, in this way, and the way the land use ordinance is, I can't do it, and it really didn't make sense the way it was. And I had a good conversation with him about it. And I've talked to our town staff about that. How can we relook at our land use ordinance in a way to give us a little more flexibility? Because number one, that provides more affordable housing in town if we're able to add on to a home or build another little home on a lot. But number 2, it also makes it more affordable to the person who's living in that property to be able to get a little income by being able to rent that out. Now, that's not something we could rush right out and do because it would have implication for several zones in town. But I know we're hearing from our residents and our citizens that they want to have options for being able to age in place and stay in place and be able to have smaller homes to live in, and I think that's a good one.
All right, well, I think we have about 15 minutes left, so if folks want to go, is it that microphone right there? And ask any questions. Yeah.
Come on up, don't be shy. Nobody has a question?
If y'all don't have questions, I have more questions. So. Either way.
Go Tanner.
All right, well, let's keep going for another 15 minutes, I guess, then.
All right. Good to go? Okay. So another question I have, and I think it's your turn this time. What are your plans for, I know we hit this a little bit one more, so but what are your plans for parking for Carrboro and infrastructure more broadly?
Well, I mean, and this gets into something I think we need to touch on also. I talked about parking, about doing a deck, about relocating a couple of different sites for putting the library so that we can do a deck right off the main street for people to drive. But when you're talking about bicycling and jogging and everything else, I've spoken with Norfolk Southern about the possibility of having a bike path that runs parallel to the railroad tracks. Norfolk Southern's greatest concern, hands down, it's a liability issue for them, is people walking on the railroad tracks. And currently at Estes Park Apartments, you have a lot of people who are lower income, who work in hospitality, who are walking up the tracks at night because there's no north-south cut through right now. So they walk the tracks, it's dark at night, they go up, they dishwash, they do everything, and then 1 in the morning they're walking back on the tracks. So Norfolk Southern is very eager to try to find a solution for, can we put a path that runs parallel? It's not cutting down any trees. There's different surfaces with mountain stone and crush and run that could be used that would work well with that area. You get into issues like rail, and again, while I've had some of the higher ups at Norfolk Southern, I was talking to them about, is it a possibility for us to have a railroad car, an electric diesel, which you can buy, have it on the tracks and share the tracks that are currently being used to move the coal cars? And they said, I don't see why not. Currently, there's no schedule for the coal cars that deliver all the coal to UNC Power Plant. Because no one uses the tracks, they can go whenever they want. But if they were put onto a schedule, then they would operate on a schedule, and then we would have a car that would absolutely move from downtown Carrboro to the Amtrak station in downtown Durham, or to the new Durham Athletic Park. There's actually, the track runs right over there. I've ridden on the engine a couple of times and ridden all the way out over there. So the infrastructure for that is already there. The railroad crossings, the trestles, that's all there. They're all rated for railroad cars filled with coal, so it's not a weight issue, it's not a speed issue, it's not a traffic issue. It's an issue of, can we just think outside the box and make something like that happen? And then we would have, in downtown Carrboro, we'd be far ahead of the curve of light rail with having access to going to downtown Durham. And it actually has a spur that even goes to downtown Hillsborough, so we could even go into downtown Hillsborough when they built the Amtrak station there. So there's a lot of things you can do when you're talking about the infrastructure of Carrboro and the downtown, whether it's parking, whether it's bike paths where we don't have to pave the woods. I'm against putting a road through with phase 3 and 4 with Bowling Creek. We don't need to pave the woods. They're currently, the other day we rode our bicycles back there on the tracks. I ran on those tracks. They're currently jogging and bicycling tracks that run all through the woods that have been there for 50 years. And I rode my bike through there, the same place I ran cross country while I was in high school. And they're beautiful, and they're low impact on the environment because they're very narrow trails and they drain very well into the soil. And when you put an impervious surface down and water's running off, and you're cutting down forest and opening the canopy, it's not what we need to be doing right now. And honestly, I don't, again, when we look at the budget and the cost of what it costs for every 1,000 feet of paved roadway into the woods, it adds up very quickly. So I'd rather we work with Norfolk Southern, we run parallel to the railroad tracks where we don't have to do anything. And in fact, Norfolk Southern would help pick up the tab for a lot of that cost.
Thank you. And then just same question.
Okay. Well, with regard to infrastructure, if we work with Norfolk Southern, who I have spoken to as well, if we're able to get over a lot of hurdles, which we could on some of our issues, it will be pretty pricey. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. But I think that there's some room for some possible long-term solutions along the railroad, but it's not by any means, I think, going to be an easily done deal, and it would be expensive, but that's on the table for some future time. I'll just talk briefly about infrastructure in general and say that, you know, the town has a pretty comprehensive bicycle plan and a greenways master plan. And both of those were set up, put in place many years ago to kind of identify, you know, where over time we would build out infrastructure so that people are able to get around the town more easily. Same with our sidewalks too. You know, every so often we roll out new bonds and we add sidewalks onto you know, roads where we see traffic patterns or where it makes sense, or where we, like right now we've added South Greensboro into the loop, but you know, we kind of are always looking at, with an eye toward making, you know, the most walkable, bikeable, transit-friendly town in North Carolina stay that way. You know, where do we add sidewalks? Where do we go next on our bicycle transportation plan, which we're in the process of updating? And where do we go next with our greenway plan as money's become available? And a lot of that has to do with money, has to do with land use patterns and where people are moving around.
Thanks. And we have a question over here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, but not through the microphone.
I'll talk loud. I wanted to know what you do in your current position to advance racial equity and what you would do or are doing as mayor of Carrboro.
You want to start?
Sure. Yeah, so racial equity has been a kind of I think a priority of the board in recent years. A few years ago we had a retreat that was devoted in large part to how we could look at every decision we make through a racial equity lens. And we found that we have a lot of room for improvement. Many of the board members, if not all of us, have attended racial equity training put on by the REI Institute to kind of recognize that, you know, we're all privileged, all of us who are I'll speak for myself, as a white person, growing up in a, you know, middle to upper class family, I definitely was privileged through my life experience. And how can we, you know, work to put others on a more level playing field with us? So going through the training has helped. We've asked our town manager to have our staff, you know, first our directors and then our staff members also go through equity training to kind of have a greater awareness. We've had community conversation around high-profile racial issues, police shootings, you know, Confederate flag conversations, Silent Sam conversations, you know, around the underlying issues around a lot of that. You know, we've got a lot of work to do, but I think that our town takes seriously the hard work it's going to take to continue to work on that.
Sure. And just really quick, how many more questions do we have? There's
one.
Well, just,
Okay.
and I would add to Lydia, I would like to commend Lydia for all the work she did against HB2, because Carrboro did lead the way in a lot of that conversation, so kudos to you for doing that. It was as basically, I think a lot of us are Democrats. Lydia's a Democrat, I'm a Democrat. I don't think there's a lot of love for Trump in the room, and we all have to do our part, particularly in coming up, and to whatever we can do to push back. Having Cooper in is a great thing, but we are still a Republican-controlled legislature in the state. We have to do everything we can to lead the way and push back in that areas, but thank you for all that work you did.
My question is, why is the emphasis on a library when we have libraries at UNC, state-of-the-art library in Chapel Hill? I'm a former merchant in Carrboro. I am a merchant in Chapel Hill. All you have to do is look at downtown Chapel Hill and see what it's become. And I am concerned about Carrboro because of the charm, the small business merchants. They will be dinosaurs if they are not taken care of. And the way they are taken care of is by patronage and parking. plain and simple. I left Carrboro because I did not have any walk-in traffic, and I went to University Mall. Plain and simple. That's what it's all about. And they are your tax base, and they are starving and trying to maintain their businesses and be individuals and stay alive. And they need the support of the community. If Carrboro is going to be the charming little town that it's supposed to be. Chapel Hill used to be a village. It used to be charming. I've been here since 1965. It isn't that anymore. Thank you.
I want to say I agree with a lot of what you said, that I want to support our businesses, and I don't want to see businesses leave, and I want to help our local businesses. I feel like I and the board, I feel like we have the support of a lot of local businesses. Just left Camerons who left University Mall to come here to be in Carrboro. So I think a lot of the decisions that we're making are with an eye toward those very values that you just expressed. Thank you.
And then I think we have time for a few more questions, but if you do have a question, just please line up at the microphone. Do we have any other questions? I saw a hand. Oh. Was that whoever asked the question, was that directed to one person, or did you want both candidates to answer?
Well, I mean, I think I've kind of answered it already, which is, I think we need to very quickly look at what's going on with the library and parking in the downtown area. And
Sure, we can move to the next question.
yeah.
And is it to one or both?
It's both of them. What do you think about our community-owned water plant, Owassa, adding fluoride to our water without our consent?
Great. And then, do you want to take this first
Sure.
one? And we can keep it rapid fire.
You know, I'll be honest, Jackie Helvey brought this up to me at kind of an art party, and I didn't know a whole lot about it, and I've been researching it, and one of the first things she said to me is, Mike, read the back of a tube of toothpaste. It says, do not swallow. And I was like, huh. And the more I've been looking into it, I think there's some studies that say, pediatricians say, well, yeah, it's a good thing for small children, put fluoride in the water, but it's becoming more and more unnecessary. As we've gotten better hygiene, I mean, this is a staple that goes back into the 1950s. And doing it without the consent of the people, I think is kind of where we've crossed a line on it. So I would actually, on this one, I would pull back on it. I don't think it's a necessary thing at this point. I think education and instruction, but also having the input of the people in there before they just put fluoride in the water without people having a say in it, I think has been the biggest issue going on right now.
Yeah, I know there are a lot of folks in the community that are really concerned about this. We heard, I know Chapel Hill heard a lot from them after the water crisis in February, and then with the re-entry of fluoride into our water. And a lot of the folks came to our first board meeting in September and talked to our board about this for about 2 hours, their concerns about the fluoride. But as I said that night, and as I believe a majority of our board, if not all of our board, felt, jurisdictionally, this is under the auspice of the Owassa Board of Directors. If it's a conversation, and this is advice that I gave to the Owassa Board of Directors, was to, you know, if they decide not to remove fluoride, we'll tag a time a year or 2 or 3 away where they'll revisit it again and let the community talk about it again. But my feeling is it needs to be debated, decided, researched by the folks who sit on the Owassa Board of Directors, the folks who know a heck of a lot more about that than I certainly do, or that we on the Carrboro Board of Aldermen, or the Chapel Hill Town Council, or the Hillsborough Town Council, or the Orange County Commissioners if it needs to be a conversation, it needs to be led and directed by that body, because that body is the body that is that ultimately makes the decision to have the fluoride or not, informed by our representatives. But jurisdictionally, I think that's where the conversation needs to be.
All right, I think we have time for one last question.
Hey, how you doing? I agree on the parking issue. I think parking is still always an issue coming in to Carrboro as a consumer. Certainly, some of the stuff with the car mill and some of the towing practices and that kind of stuff. I know a lot of friends of mine have been caught out there with that situation. My question is specifically regarding the Cat's Cradle and the development of the Cat's Cradle and the Art Center. And that seems like it's been paused for many years now. And I've heard so many different conversations about we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that, and I haven't seen any movement on it. So I think the Cat's Cradle is a huge institution to this town. It's part of the lifeblood and the community and the creative folks in this town.
You're here.
And you know, honestly, I don't really care what like chain hotels want to do. I want to know, you know, what the town can do to help the Cat's Cradle out.
Sure, thank you. So we had the conversation a few years ago where there was this proposal to have a joint art center, and it may have even included Carolina Performing Arts and some others. I don't think it necessarily included the Cradle at that time. It came before the town, and the town said, no, this is moving too fast, let's have a reboot. That's why we're having conversation right now with the Arts Center about whether they want to be a part of the building at 203 South Greensboro. So, but on a separate track, and I know I've seen Frank out here in the audience. I mean, Frank has spoken with many members of the Board of Aldermen, if not all of us, on different occasions over the last couple of years about wanting to stay in Carrboro. We keep reassuring Frank we want him to stay in Carrboro. You know, we've helped serve. I don't want to get too much into any of the business, but we've helped serve at times as an intermediary or trying to help work out ways to help Frank be able to stay here, or if he wants to move somewhere else, we've shown him other areas where maybe the Cradle could move. I think the board shares your concerns 100% that we don't want to lose the Cradle.
And I mean, we're sitting in a room that Frank built and spent a considerable amount of money out of his own pocket to build this. And it's an amazing space to all of a sudden, you know, turn on your heels and say, we can move you over here. We need to do more to keep Frank here. Frank is more than just a part of the community. He's an anchor for Carrboro. And the concerts here draw thousands of people every month to Carrboro, thousands. And they eat dinner at Milltown, they eat dinner at Armadillo, they eat over at Crossroads, or Crosshouse, sorry, still have a hard time saying it. They eat all around here. And then they come to a show, and then they leave. And this is one of the greatest things that ever happened, was as Frank expanded and grew and locked down. I love the Cradle. I've known Frank since high school, and the way that he gives back is extremely important. He's very quiet about it, but he just does a lot of work. He gives spaces to charities for free, no charge, so they can raise, you know, absolute money, whether it's Be Loud or you know, Lineberger Cancer Research. I know all this stuff because I'm in here photographing a lot of it. It's absolutely imperative. And again, when we talk about supporting local businesses, Frank is at the top of the list. And one of the things that I would love, you know, I've kind of thrown this at him. I would love for us to come up with like almost like a mini North Carolina Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, jazz, blues, rock, country. Frank would curate it with the Southern Folklife Collection. He's said he would be interested in it if we had a space. North Carolina, either artists that were born in North Carolina or artists that made their careers in North Carolina. And again, people look at it and they go, that's a great idea, but it's like, this draws people in. You know, I take my kids to Marbles Museum in Raleigh, and then we have lunch. Dude, there's destinations, Museum of Life and Science, they're destination places, and if Carrboro had something like that, if the town was behind, and I think that, you know, just because we brought Frank up, he's an absolute perfect fit for curating a space like that. So, just throwing it out. Exactly.
All right. Well, let's give both of our candidates a round of applause.
And while we're on the subject, let's give the Cradle a round of applause. And Tanner Glenn for moderating. Make sure you vote.
That is the most important thing. Please, no matter who you support, please vote and encourage your friends to vote. We're in an off election year. Please go out.
1 week from now.